So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this panel on AI in the newsroom, the good, the bad, and what's ahead for the industry. My name's Judy Parnall. As you can probably tell from my accent, I've come from the UK, where I worked for the BBC in our research and development department. I'm really pleased to be here and talking about something that's really impacting us all. We are all worrying about the same things. We hear, don't we, about the hype cycle of technology. I've been talking, as far as particularly generative AI is concerned, about the hysteria cycle. I think it's, things have really taken off and people are reacting in very extreme ways. But what I'd like us to do today is just take a bit of a step back. There are lots of ways we can use AI. There are lots of ways we are using AI. Perhaps some of us aren't really aware of it. Oh, certainly some of our journalists aren't aware of it. But what's the problems? What are the things we should be thinking about? So I have a great panel here to introduce them, and I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves. And I have given them each a challenge. So would you please introduce yourself and tell me, what do you think is good about AI, and what do you think is bad about AI? So, Scott, do you want to start?
All right. Hi, I'm Scott Zabieski. I'm the Chief Content Officer of Channel One, a AI news startup. I would say what's good about AI, what we're excited about, number one is the ability to translate news to a multitude of languages. So both meaning you can start with a story in English or any language, but for us starting in English and getting that story out to not any language, but almost any language in the world. And the same thing is we can pull stories directly from other countries that we didn't used to use as content, translate them and bring them to the United States, and then we can bring that back out to the rest of the world. So language technology is exciting to us, and the economics also, being able to do things for cheaper. Right now, obviously, the news industry is in a tough time with economics. Things we've seen businesses going or seen organizations going out of business or not able to succeed at this with the current model. So we think we can introduce a new model that's more affordable. Now, what's bad about AI? We are very cognizant of the idea that there's a trust issue, right? How do you know if you can trust what you're seeing in the news? And then finally, I would say for a lot of us that work in the industry am I going to lose my job? That's something people are worried about, right? So that's something we have to address as well, as will AI replace humans?
Right. Thank you. Christina.
I oversee Scripps News, which is the national network of the EW Scripps company. I also co-chair our enterprise-wide governance committee for AI. On the good side, I'm going to stick with efficiencies. I have to say that really as a result of where technology is today, and then also candidly in ways we'll talk about, our internal comfort, our in-practice use cases are not particularly fancy, but there are a couple of things that we are really looking forward to. And then on the bad side, I'm going to stick with trust, but a little bit of a different angle specific to our newsrooms, which is what I would call sort of the existential threat to accountability journalism in particular. The ways in which generative AI and deepfakes in particular make the work of accountability journalism even harder for our journalists.
Right.
Hi, Mohamed Moawad, the managing editor of Jazeera here. Thanks for coming to the session. So basically on the good side, I think timing and context was very important and crucial for us in news media to benefit from this new technology. I mean, when this technology buzzed in the news media ecosystem, when it landed was very crucial, because that's when we were trying to make sure that we reinvent ourselves. I mean, news media faced the challenges. Traditional news media faced a massive challenge recently regarding reinventing the news delivery, make sure that we are relevant in the market with new social media platforms out there, the access to information and news, which is available now for anyone. You receive push notifications on your phone to audience come to us well informed. So it was a challenge. And then AI came and it helped us a lot in making sure that we go more in depth. I mean, in a short time period, in a fast-paced kind of news industry, we try to make sure that we do our work in a short time period, and AI helped us a lot in the newsroom to make sure that we go in depth in a short time. And in terms of the bad side, I think a lot to talk about, because news industry, news media, accuracy is a very important factor, and we sometimes rush to conclusions that AI offers us in terms of analyzing, imagery from satellites, even drawing conclusions from data. We rush to take the conclusions that we get out of AI tools, but then we have to be cautious about the accuracy, because it's not 100% accurate, and that's a challenge.
Try that again. All right. Scott Ehrlich, I am Chief Innovation Officer, Head of Corporate Strategy at Sinclair. And no, I'm not totally sure what that title means either. I would say the good news about AI is that even from a corporate perspective, and more so beyond the newsroom, it forces us to reevaluate everything that we're doing. And so whether it is traffic or finance or story publishing or how we manage the archives or how we extract value from our archives, we get the opportunity to reevaluate every single thing that we're doing and say, okay, is this something AI can help with? The bad news is, the negative is, we're forced to reexamine each and everything that we do to understand how AI is going to impact it. And I don't think that we've yet found a corner of the organization that isn't going to be impacted in some way, shape, or form. And I think one of the big challenges, not so much that this is a negative, but just a challenge, one of the big challenges is prioritizing all of the use cases that you can develop for generative AI across the entire enterprise. And we set up an internal committee much like yours. I might share it, actually. I should find out. I should know that. Yeah, you have to ask, right? But that's really been sort of one of the challenges, is we have a cross-company effort, and every department is represented. Literally every department is represented in that effort. And just managing the aspirations of each and every department and trying to put that into a framework that's what's important to the company and how we prioritize going about this. It's a cool challenge, but a challenge nonetheless.
That's great. At least I do know that I'm not challenging our cross committee on AI. So you talk about examining and re-examining everything you do. How are each of you doing that? And what are the things that you're looking at? How are you doing this in practice?
I'll jump off the cliff first. So really, we've taken sort of I guess the simplistic version is sort of a two-pronged approach. So on the one hand, we have a group, we have a small team that looks at everything you read about, anything that comes around. We take a look at, we'll dive in, we'll work with startups, we'll try to understand what it is they're doing, what they're working on, try to extract what we think the value for our organization can be. Rafi back there, my colleague, leads that effort for us. And we're just constantly out looking and hunting and whatnot. And at the same time, we try to educate the operating side of the company on what's possible and what's current and state of the art, and try to inspire them to develop use cases that make sense within their own departments, and then bring those back centrally. And then what we're finding is the use cases kind of group together, right? You'll get HR will say, hey, can we have a chatbot that answers questions from the employee handbook? And, IT will say, hey, can we have a chatbot that answers the most common IT questions? Well, it turns out the back end of that is the same question. It's the same technology in the back end. And by the way, it's the same technology again that allows our newsrooms to go and query things that we've reported before to give them a head start on the next story they're working on.
I think the fact that this is a kind of an open field and access to it is open for anyone. You don't have to have like a huge organization with a strong capacity to work and try to access this kind of field and try to know more about the tools out there. So that poses a kind of a challenge for us, because we need to make sure that wherever there is a tool there, and we have to examine in terms of on all kind of levels of the organizations. I'm talking about editorial, creative, operational, so all sides. But, what we're doing right now is strategizing and making sure that, it is for anyone in the team, in the newsroom to investigate and kind of, try a tool and come up with an idea and, engage with the other team. How could we benefit from that tool? And I'm going to give you an example of the Turkish elections, for example. When we covered the Turkish elections, it was a kind of a rematch or a second round. And one of our colleagues came up with an idea that why don't we feed an AI tool with all the data from last elections and the first round of the elections, and ask the AI to come up with a kind of a conclusion or kind of a prediction of the second round of the elections, and try to present that to the audience in a very visual storytelling way. And it worked well. I mean, the fact that you are able to create scenarios, and I think we are approaching the US elections, this is one of the areas that we are investigating as well. The fact that you have a tool that empowers journalists to create scenarios and different kind of, scenarios for an event is an empowerment for the whole newsroom. And this is something that our colleagues at Creative, Operation as well are investigating. And that's about it. Yes.
I'm on the news side, and a couple of years ago, I looked at a pie chart that was really horrifying. It illustrated the time spent by our journalists on non-news gathering functions. And when you looked at the progression of the addition of duties like creating a digital version, coming up with social copy, reformatting for different social platforms, what you ended up with was a pie chart that saw the most critical function of our journalists shrink and shrink and shrink over time, and that's news gathering. That chart became our very simple blueprint and mission for what tools and use cases we pursued and prioritized for our journalists. How do we get that pie chart to be as much news gathering and as much not news gathering as possible? And what that's led to today is a world in which AI helps our journalists format their broadcast scripts for digital, generate SEO-friendly headlines, format for social media, and a number of other sort of tasks that take away the drudgery of the post-news gathering process to, again, allow our journalists to focus on what is most significant, which is the news gathering.
Great. So as a startup, we're in a very different situation than these established organizations. They've got established workflows. They've been doing things a certain way for a long time, and any change that they make has to fit into that workflow. It's an evolution, not a revolution. And so we kind of know what our strengths are and what are not our strengths. For us, we know as a startup, our strength is not beating them at journalism. We still think that humans are the key to good journalism. I don't think we're anywhere near AI being able to go out, read the internet, and write a great story that you can trust. So for what we're doing, we're really relying on partners. Like, for instance, we have a deal with Reuters. They'll provide us with news that's written by humans. And what we're really focusing on is the efficiencies of how do you distribute that story? How do you edit that into a video package? How do you send that out to a bunch of different countries? And eventually, one of the things that we're looking at is personalization of the news. So when you're watching a newscast, you can watch something that's a 30-minute newscast, but instead of it being the same thing everybody in the country is seeing, it can be about your local area. It could have the sports scores from your favorite team, even if your favorite team isn't in the city you live in. It could, business news could have the stocks or the industries that you're watching exactly customized to you. And so really we're relying on the professionals, the journalists, to figure out all these really difficult things that I don't envy you guys. I wouldn't even pretend to come up here and tell them how to make AI work in terms of journalism. I feel like there's journalism and then there's the business and the distribution of news. And right now we're focused on that second part. And so we think there's a real opportunity there. But for us to do what we're doing successfully, people have to trust the news. And for that trust, we want to be partnered with reputable news organizations and say, hey, these guys know how to do the journalism. Now let us bring this journalism to you in new and exciting ways.
That's great. Do you find you're doing these things on your own, or who are you working with to do this? Are you just, what sort of organizations?
I think they fall into two categories. There's, well, I guess three. There's very large organizations like the big consulting firms and the big tech companies that are implementing, whether it's AI technology or AI workflows across a range of industry sectors, a range of other customers, in many cases, some of our competitors. And so we learn a lot about what other people who look like us are doing, and where some of the big tech players are going. I was here a couple of weeks ago for Adobe's summit, and they're doing amazing things. So, companies like them and Microsoft and AWS and Google and those guys are sort of one category. We're really, really intrigued. Most of my group, we come from the startup world actually, and we're sort of the fish out of water at the big company. But, and so we go back to our roots. So we work with venture capital firms. We work with startups all the time to see where the innovation is happening, where the cutting edge innovation is happening. And then the third part of it is our in-house team. Really who have taken, we've taken the time to bring these folks in and given them the time to learn how our company works and what's important to getting our product on the air. We're in the local news business, right? And understanding sort of the relationship between the local, we call them local content centers, but what used to be the newsroom and their communities. That's a very special relationship. And so starting to understand the unique things about our company that AI can help us attack, and whether that's, helping the journalists in the newsroom get a head start on a story, reimagining how our graphics department works, not just in a market, but across markets, reimagining how our promo department works. And I think it's really a combination of the big players, the innovative startups, and then, the people that really are domain experts on our own company.
I think as a leading international news organization, we get kind of approached a lot by organizations, startups, and ventures about an AI tool, a fancy AI tool that would make our life easy. And you started recently to notice that it became a kind of a selling point. And I don't like that. I mean, folks out there should know that news organizations are really interested in optimizing their work. We're not shopping around for new tools. We're trying to make sure that we cater to our needs. I mean, we have, as for Al Jazeera, we have 3 goals now: to make our news more friendly, interactive, and, compelling. So whatever tool is going to help us make sure that we contextualize news, make it more in-depth news, because, apparently we're not the only people exclusively on the news. You get it all over everywhere. So we have to make sure that when the audience come to us, they see a new thing. I mean, the new thing is contextualizing news and making sure that we give context of the news and it's more in-depth and well analyzed. So if there is a tool that would help empower the journalist and save time to make sure that what we offer is a slow-cooked news in a short time, it's a win for us. So we optimize our work. We're not shopping around. We're not looking for new tools, because there are thousands of tools out there and companies and the startups working on AI and became a kind of a selling point. But we are strategizing, making sure that we are optimizing our work using AI or through AI tools out there.
On the news side, our interest in generative AI is primarily to solve problems, to do better journalism. And so you asked who our partners or our stakeholders are. Our primary partners and stakeholders are journalists and our audience. That are the key stakeholders in terms of determining priorities. As an example, I talked about some of the ways that we've prioritized to assist our journalists to get to a place where return to a place really where they more of their time is focused on news gathering. On solving problems for our audiences, we are of course also in the local news business, and one of the things that we've heard from our audiences is wanting more coverage of local public life, city council coverage, school board coverage, and as newsrooms shrink, that is a problem very much worth solving. And there is where I think generative AI poses really incredible opportunities to allow us to effectively be there when we can't be there. The same tools that our journalists use across every newsroom to transcribe an interview and then synthesize the most important parts can also be applied at the school board or city council level to flag our journalists when something of interest has happened, even when we weren't there to bear primary public witness. But then allow us to then prioritize resources for follow-up reporting as necessary. So I think those are just a couple of examples, again, with a very sort of sharp focus on solving problems toward the improvement and increasing quality of journalism.
Again, we're sort of the opposite direction, right? You've got these legacy big journalism organizations who are starting to look at new technologies and how they can use them. We're a startup who has these cool new technologies, but we don't have the journalism expertise. So we're kind of going the other direction where for partnerships, we're looking at everyone from these big organizations and how do we partner with them, whether it's taking their content, producing, you've got Reuters I mentioned. There's other brands that we're doing deals with right now that I can't announce because they're not done yet, but they're, big companies and brands that.
Don't you want to break some news here?
I wish I could. But they're big brands that you'd recognize. And so we'll be doing, content with them as well. But those are the big names that are the obvious ones. The other thing we're kind of excited about is, a lot of people know if you read a feature article in a magazine, that writer doesn't necessarily work on the staff of that magazine. They're a freelance writer. They go around, shop it around, and then they get that story picked up somewhere. So we think there's an opportunity also with a lot of good independent journalists out there who do work in print and don't do work in the video side to take their articles that they're already writing in print and turn those into video pieces. So there's a bigger reach for those articles and also that they can monetize those articles as well. So we're starting everywhere from the big companies all the way down to the independent journalists that, hopefully we have a way to get them more reach and get them a little bit more money as well.
I think one of the things, and I haven't primed you on this one of the things we find is when we want to do something new and to try something, our journalists are all too busy. They're off trying to capture their stories, they're writing their copy, they're going to recording their thoughts. How do you actually find you get the journalists who can try these things out? How are you actually trying to solve that problem?
They self-identify. We have 70-ish newsrooms across the country. And it hasn't been hard to sort of identify talent that wants to participate, that wants to work with us on proof of concept. Are there nerves, particularly with the on-camera talent? There are, and I understand that, and I appreciate that, and I think that if I made my living on the other side of the camera, I'd have some of those thoughts as well, but the overwhelming kind of curiosity that journalists generally bring to their jobs kind of leads them to, well, I might have a little bit of fear, but it's really interesting. I kind of want to see what's on the other side of the curtain. So I don't think it's been particularly hard to identify people that want to participate. I think it's a lot on us to find the right way to implement these tools, because at the end of the day, these are tools. They're tools to help people do their jobs better. They're not replacements, right? I mean, my favorite question is always, is AI going to replace artists that make movies? And, the reality of life is I could give a toddler a blank piece of paper and a crayon, and they'd probably get some of the crayon onto the paper, but would it be interesting? Probably not. I could repeat that experiment with 10,000 toddlers. Well, more of them would get crayon onto the paper, but how much of it would be interesting? Still not a lot. Now repeat that experiment with the 35-year-olds. Give 100,000 35-year-olds blank piece of paper and a pen. They'll all make something coherent. But how many of them will move an audience, will drive an emotion, will change people's minds the way an artist does? And the answer is about the same percentage as artists exist in society. So,
and when Pixar came out, everyone was afraid, well, this is going to be computer animation. This is going to kill all this beautiful, traditional animation, but instead it just created a ton of innovation. I mean, some of the most beautiful stuff is now a mix of hand-drawn and computer. So,
Yeah, no, listen, I'm old enough to remember every single wave of whatever it is going to kill whatever came before, right? A couple months ago, everybody was all up in arms because there was an NFL playoff game on Peacock. Oh my God, the world's ending. Well, I'm old enough to remember when those games moved from broadcast to cable. And as it turns out, the world didn't end. Like we're all still here and all still moving forward. And, it's just evolution. But in terms of AI, I think that's actually been the biggest thing, is that to the extent we have journalist talent that understand it's a tool, they self-identify as the ones that want to help us figure out how to use it.
I agree with you regarding the curiosity. I mean, it has something to do with curiosity, and curiosity is really, part of the ingredients of the journalist. So I would say that whatever exclusive reporting that you're doing and you want to take it to another level, AI could be an opportunity for any journalist to go further and follow the curiosity. I mean, I'd give you an example of something that we've done in the newsroom recently. We, at the beginning of Gaza war, we started receiving satellite imagery from planet Earth. And the thing about the imagery, that it was because of the restrictions, it wasn't high resolution kind of imagery. So it wasn't easy for us to analyze. I mean, it's a kind of a treasure for us to locate where the Israeli forces are and how they are advancing and the situation on the ground, giving the very dangerous situation for our journalists who are the only news organization covering from North Gaza. It was a kind of an opportunity for us as well to alert our journalists on the ground that the Israeli forces are in a certain area. Take care, there is this fight over there. So in terms of reporting, it was an opportunity. In terms of alerting our reporters on the ground, it was a kind of a safety measure as well. So, but how to analyze them? It was difficult. That wasn't high resolution. So we relied on AI to make the imagery high resolution first, and secondly, to, in a second, analyze it. And how many tanks, how many Israeli soldiers, approximately, of course. So it gave us this, it empowered the journalists who got this imagery from planet Earth, and it gave us the opportunity not only to take our reporting to another level, advance our reporting, make it more in-depth, more analytical, but also gave us the opportunity to have a safety measure in place that we wouldn't imagine before that.
That's great. I'm going to ask Christina, I'm going to move the conversation slightly, but it follows on from that. You talked about AI being trust, and truth and the dangers around that, particularly in the war situation, that some, there are many ways this is. What do you see as the challenges there? And, well, for all of you, what can we do about them?
I appreciate you asking that question, because this is probably, as it pertains to AI, what I think about the most. Do y'all remember the Missouri Senate candidate who had that legitimate rape gaffe? He was running against Claire McCaskill. He acknowledged the gaffe, apologized, and lost. Since then, though, we have seen a very, very clear trend of public officials realizing that there is no upside in acknowledging misconduct and error, etc. Now, against that backdrop, can you imagine the Access Hollywood tape coming out in a deepfake world? It would have been, that's AI, that's fake video, and you would have at least half the country unsure of whether to believe that was real or not. This is the source of my nightmares. It is already difficult to be to do the work of accountability journalism. And in a world in which not only are people in positions of power not incentivized to be held accountable, but now have this very, very convenient scapegoat in deepfake technology, that is a challenge. There's not only sort of like the perceived challenge, there's also like the real challenge. I'll give an example of, so we're launching a disinformation desk in June that'll be focused on debunking deepfake video and audio. One of our first projects in partnership with our local station in Baltimore was to examine audio that surfaced on social media of a high school principal purportedly saying deeply racist, deeply anti-Semitic things. The union came out quite quickly to declare the audio a deepfake. We took it to a technology partner in sort of deepfake detection, who concluded it to be, with 99% confidence, according to their technology, authentic. As we were preparing also the actual reporting and talking to people that would go along with that kind of reporting, the union came out with a deepfake detector analysis that concluded the exact opposite, that with 99% certainty, that was 99% likely to be a deepfake. Then you go back to the difficult but real and always valuable work of reporting. And I would just say, against the backdrop of all of that, what it means for our newsrooms is that we really have to double down on our connection with our audiences, our human connection with our audiences, and overall against the sort of backdrop of generative AI, to do our best to be the very best humans that we can be.
I think there's a real opportunity for you guys, for the established, trusted brands, because at the end of the day, like I saw when Iran was firing the rockets the other day, and I saw it in my Twitter feed from some person I didn't recognize. So my first thought was like, I don't know if that's true. I'll just wait to see if I see it on like a real news channel, right? And then once I did, I believed it was real, right? So as individuals, we don't have the capability of figuring out whether this stuff is true or not, which means we have somebody that maybe it's different for all of us, who's that brand you trust, but we're going to go to these brands and say, if I see it on Al Jazeera, if I see it on CNN, if I see it on Scripps, the Sinclair station, whatever it is, my local station, I trust my local anchor, we're going to have someone we want to check in with, and it's going to be it's on them to get it right, but they're also going to have a huge opportunity to be the place that everybody turns to. What I'm concerned about is to bring, talking about that, if that Access Hollywood tape came out now, is there's a lot of people who don't want to believe the truth, right? That's a different problem. There's a lot of people who don't want, it's not that they're saying, as long as you tell me what's true or not, I will go with that. They're just looking for the excuse to be like, that's muddy, so I don't believe it because it doesn't work with my guy, my team, or my guy, or my world narrative, right? So what can we do about those people? I don't know. That's a problem that's probably bigger than any of us. But I think in terms of the actual journalism and the chance for trusted names to get things right, and for those of us who do care about the truth to go to them, I think it's a huge opportunity. I think finally, my big concern, for those of us who are discerning news consumers, we, maybe occasionally we'll get tricked by something, but generally, if you're kind of skeptical or you're kind of like, I want to make sure this is true before I really go with it, we're not going to get tricked by too many fake things, I think. What I'm worried about is with really smart people is getting to a point of apathy where you just see something and you go like, I don't know. I mean, that could be true, but I don't know. It's not, and I don't even really care enough to go find out if it's true or not. Who knows these days, right? If we all get to a point where we just all go like anything could or couldn't be true and we just check out, that's where we're going to be in trouble too, right? How do we solve that? That's also a big question. I don't know if any of us knows the answer to.
If you allow me, Judy, it's a very important point here that you're raising regarding the opportunity. I acknowledge the fact that, trusted news networks are going to have an advantage here because people, once you see this report on a trusted news network, it means it's legit. But at the same time, what we have noticed recently from our reporting and the comments that we're receiving online is that people tend to see you discuss it. I mean, the fact that we used to have verification units in our newsrooms to cater to daily work of our journalists inside the newsroom only and not on the screen, this is going to change. I mean, we have to bring this debate on a screen as well. And that's what we're thinking about now. Because if there is a tape out there for a military leader and people are saying online that this is AI, this is deep fake, we have to bring this discussion that is there in the public sphere on a screen and talk about it and show people how we verify that. Because some people would say at the end of the day, if we don't bring this to the screen, to the discussion on air, people would accuse us in the future of, accepting deep fake videos and airing them on.
I couldn't agree with that more. As we were forming our disinformation desk, I had included in the budget request up there a graphics producer, because the ability to show, we looked at the XF metadata of the video file. Here it is, or we matched this audio file with the audio file in this video, is a key part. That transparency and frankly the humility that is required in that transparency is really important. And for us, that meant we had to have a graphics producer who could illustrate and show our process.
Yeah, the content authenticity stuff is critical. We actually just shipped the first videos that were manipulated using AI. It was a tennis channel video that we're shipping to Tennis Channel Spain. And we had the video translated into Spanish using AI, lip sync redone. But we have a watermark and a QR code that went out with that video that said, hey, this video has been manipulated using AI. You want to click on the QR code, you find out exactly what we did. There's always a link to the original video so you can tell. And that's great. That's part of what we can do to be transparent with our audience as to what we know. We're working with the camera manufacturers to make sure that there is a from the glass signature of authenticity. And so there are things that we can do.
Are phone manufacturers part of that effort?
No. These are professional camera manufacturers. It'll eventually get to I think the guys doing mobile as well, but like, the big people that we all buy studio cameras from, it's really with them. And there's certain things that we can do, but like I've had an opportunity to play with a bunch of these things that are meant to detect whether something is real or generated by AI. And so far, I'm batting 75% and fooling them. And I'm not good at this, so that's not a good sign, right? That's bad. And the reality of life is the AI generation is getting so much better so quickly. It is inevitable. There is a news organization, clearly not one of ours, right? but there's a news organization that's going to screw this up. It's going to happen. It's going to happen in a very dramatic way. And I think that's actually the next most important moment in bringing this technology and all the good it can do to our industry is how does everybody react when that happens? Does everybody go, oh, well, that's clearly a bad news organization? Or does everybody take a step back and go, we're humans, right? To your point, that wasn't a mistake that wasn't bound to happen by one of us, right? Let's understand and let's see how whoever that is, let's see how they react more so than the fact that they actually went down that path. Cause I mean, we've all seen these videos that they're very, very hard and getting harder to tell the difference just by looking at it, or really by running it through a digital process either.
That technology you're talking about is something we've experimented with too, which is basically being able to take a clip where someone's speaking one language, and when it comes out the other end, it's that person speaking a different language with the sound of their voice and their lips moving. So it sounds like if I'm speaking in English, I can come out speaking Spanish, and it sounds like I'm a native Spanish speaker, right? So that's a very cool, in some ways, we have a demo that we did on our website, and we took a person who was telling France 24 the story of how a storm blew his house down. He said it in French, and we showed how the technology could have him say it in English. And our thought process was that's valuable because if you just had some other voice come over and dub over it and read it with no emotion, you're taking out the emotion of a guy. You know, you're not experiencing this person talking about something bad that happened to them. We wanted to convey that. But we also knew it was important, like you said, to have a watermark to say this is altered by AI because, you know, even someone had said, well, why don't you have, if you have Zelensky, if he's talking about, you know, the president of Ukraine, he's talking about, giving a speech, you could have him say it in English and then people could understand it. But if he's speaking in perfect English, does that change your perception of him? Does that change the context of the news clip? I think it does. And so sometimes you got to think about these unintended consequences where it's like, that's really cool technology, but we are all judging everything by the context of what's happening. And if you're assuming someone speaks 10 different languages and they don't, that's going to change your perception of a real life person.
And to that point, I mean, that's why we started with Tennis Channel.
Oh, right? I wasn't criticizing you guys. No, I think you're doing it right.
This is actually a conversation we had. So we started with Tennis Channel because, you know, the fan base is obviously very rabid for tennis, right? And a much lower risk environment. Moving that technology to manipulating the subject of a news story, man, that'd be a giant leap from where I think we feel comfortable now.
One of the things we just launched is a number of our markets have high Spanish-speaking populations. Our Corpus Christi station in particular has a Univision affiliate. The English language channel has a lot more news gathering and reporting resources. Using a combination of HeyGen and 11 Labs, those English-speaking reporters' reports were lip sync overdubbed and translated in super convincing fashion. We ultimately decided, though, that the lip sync overdub was just a step too far. And to your point, what is our Univision audience going to think when they learn that those correspondents don't actually speak Spanish? And so we did launch a translation initiative for the Univision audience in Corpus Christi, but we did it without the lip sync overdub, and then with, of course, clear and transparent disclosure and human intervention at every step of the process. Still a huge opportunity to capture in terms of growing the reach of our journalism, but we think that we found the most ethical way to go about it.
And I was talking to a colleague who works for a competitor news organization to Al Jazeera, and they've done the most damaging thing to the whole news industry in the region by airing a video that was dubbed in different languages for their presenter. And one of the things I told them that, you know, as a news organization, you have to look how people are perceiving what you're offering them. I mean, because it somehow badly affect your status as a news organization. I mean, you have to make sure that whatever tool you use, you are dictated by the ethics of the news organization, because next day people would say that, how do I know that this is right? How do I know that this presenter speaks Arabic? How do I know that this presenter speaks English and perceive the question in the right way? So I think this is a very important factor, and we should be conservative about that.
Yeah, and I think also audiences are going to change. I mean, as audiences become more savvy and more educated, what is not acceptable today may be acceptable in 5 or 10 years when people are like, everybody understands how, I mean, I would use,
as long as you give them a link back to the original.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's incredibly important, because then it's the user's choice. You want to watch it in Spanish, you can watch it in Spanish. You want to watch it in German, you can watch it in German. You want to watch in English, which by the way is the original, you can watch it in English. It's up to you, right?
Yeah, I just use an example, like documentaries are obviously similar to news in some ways in terms of ethics and having to present factual stuff. And at some point, somebody for the first time in a documentary used recreation footage or used a shot of something that wasn't from the exact moment that thing happened, but it helped illustrate. And I'm sure that was a big discussion to be like, well, that's not from the moment that happened. And somebody had to say, yeah, but we want the people to see that, you know, that's not actually the people walking into FBI headquarters when it happened. It's just it's B-roll of FBI headquarters. We want to show that. And it probably seemed like a big deal at the time. And now people do it all the time without thinking twice, because they know the audience is used to saying like, yeah, of course I know that this recreation footage isn't exactly as it happened. So, but that was an evolution. Someone made that first choice. There's a lot of discussion, and then it was probably done thoughtfully, and slowly the audience moves forward with the technology. So I assume that we're all going to be having this discussion for years to come, and the goalposts are going to keep moving as people get more savvy, I think.
So as we get towards the end of our time, what I'd like to ask each of you is, what do we see ahead? We talked about the good and the bad, and what's ahead for the industry. So, in a few short sentences, what do you think is you're going to see ahead? Understanding that as someone said to me, you always overestimate what you can do in 6 months and underestimate what will happen in 3 years. So, what do you think? Where we're going? What do you think we are going to be doing?
I mean, I'm an optimist. Obviously, that's why I'm doing this. If I didn't believe in that the pros outweighed the cons. And so I think there's a real opportunity for the technology to be used in a good way, and for, you know, news to become to do a better job, to have better resources for journalists, you know, the stuff that even we're not doing, but they're doing. Their stuff's going to be better done. The distribution's going to open up a whole new world. We're going to be seeing stories from parts of the world that we're not used to seeing. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So I'm really excited for it. I think, like we said, there's a lot of challenges. We have to be responsible about it. But I think, I actually think the news industry we're going to look back and say, yeah, it was a tough time there for a second, but I think we figured it out, and we're in a better place than we were before.
I may be a little contrarian.
Ooh, clap. That's empty.
And say that I think as it pertains to, our newsrooms and the actual, work of news gathering, I really don't anticipate it being radically different, in at least a couple, of years. My hope, my sort of optimist perspective is that, we will continue to take, you know, to reduce the amount of drudgery that is, non-news gathering, related. But, I think the core fundamental work of, building sources, getting those sources to share things, with you, and then vetting what you've been told and reporting that out at its core, isn't gonna change. But I share your point of view that that distribution.
I think we kind of agree. What I'm saying is that, yeah,
right.
like I think if we can, yeah.
You're right, because otherwise we've got 2 minutes left.
Go.
Yeah, so I think that we've dealt in the news industry with the citizen journalism with the same kind of sensational kind of look. And I think what we are looking ahead is a more immersive kind of news coverage that AI is going to empower journalists to make. And that's a big opportunity. And by immersive, I don't mean only in terms of visual storytelling, but also in terms of the actual reporting and the contextualizing of the story. So I see an opportunity ahead, but at the same time, I see challenges. And the more we are cautious in using these tools, the more we are going to avoid these challenges.
I'll stick with your 6-month, 10-year framework. So 6 months, I think we will basically be moving along two axes. One will be efficiencies in the newsroom and news gathering, and the other will be accessibility of content through things like translation and being able to get to other platforms. 10 years, I think by the time you get to 10 years and look back, it will be a much more personalized experience where the machines are learning what's important to me and getting the stories and pictures and whatnot that are important to me in a more efficient way.
That's great. Thank you. We're just about coming to the end of our time, so I'm going to wrap up with something with a line from a promotion from a short clip that went out from BBC News to all our customers, which said, "You can trust what it says when you know how it was made." Actually, we are coming to a time when we need to be transparent. We're going to be using these tools. Some will have the challenges, but let's be transparent and bring our audiences with us, because we are really important. And, you know, we've got a really important job that we're all doing in actually keeping the world, and democracy going. So let's keep it up, being transparent, moving, forward with the opportunities, but, being with a little bit degree of caution. So thank you to the panel. It's been a great time.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.